Thank you so much for having me, and what a gorgeous day to be here in Greyton, out of my studio of Between Two Barrels. And I want to start straight away. I mean, I think it'll take me way more than the usual 15 minutes to list your achievements. But recently been joined on the Cape Winemakers Guild, one of South Africa's most established winemakers, and you're not South African. I mean, the long list, incredible. Tim Atkin scored you as a first growth recently in his latest reports, 95 plus points here and there. What is the recipe? I mean, my God, I mean, you only arrived here 16 years ago, I believe, and you have no winemaking background, and there you go. So you need to give me a few tips, because in my second life, I really want to try and go in your footsteps.
Yeah, I think the recipe that I finally figured out is terroir, and I know it sounds cliche, but the reality is I was very blessed when I moved onto this farm and I planted vineyards to grow something special. And in the first few years, I did let the terroir speak for itself, but I was still trying to make wine. And in these last few years, I finally have understood how to let this space express itself. And that certainly is showing with every subsequent vintage. The wine just becomes really profound and really beautiful. And ironically, it gets lighter and lighter and more floral. And so I think the traditional South African idea that bigger is better, darker is better, power is quality, I'm moving in exactly the opposite direction from that. And the wines do better every year.
Yeah, and so clearly also the palate is of people is moving in that direction, of more elegance. But now the story is what fascinates me. I mean, we were here with my wife, I think 5 years ago, when Port to Port just started, and obviously, I mean, you skyrocketed since, but you were already very established at the time. And from Southern California to South Africa, I mean, and not only to South Africa, we could have chosen an easier route. You could have gone to Stellenbosch. And every time I drive out here or I start leaving from home, I ask myself, oh my God, what made you think to get here? But then obviously you drive this road. It's so incredible. But how did you find Greyton in the first place?
We were living in Hout Bay when we first landed in South Africa, and a friend of ours, a neighbor, invited us to come to Greyton. And we had no idea where we were going. It was the end of August, and we drove out of Cape Town with our brand new baby strapped into the back seat, and drove through these bright orange canola fields with purple lupin in checkerboard and bright green wheat, and we had no idea where we were going. Wow. And then as we made that turn off from the N2, the clouds lifted and there was snow on the mountains, and we got to Greyton, and that friend said, you know, I'm not interested in looking at the farm anymore. I don't want to go out there. And so we took the appointment, and as we drove down this long dusty road, the snow-capped mountains, the waterfall came into view, the waterbloemetjies in the pond down below, and there were dairy cows on these slopes. And we looked at each other, and we were looking for something that we could do as a family to stay in South Africa and build something together. And he looked at me and said, you know, we could plant vineyards and make wine.
Wow.
And I thought we could. And so we checked into the post house with the clothes on our back and our little baby in the little carrier. And 4 days later, put an offer in on this old dairy. And so, I mean, the original idea was very romantic, and it was very naive. It was very arrogant. It was naive. It was a lot of things. It was...
Some say.
Some say. Yeah, in retrospect, maybe. But at the time, it was just very idealistic.
And were there vineyards around here already?
No, none. There was actually there was 1 hectare, I think, that my neighbor had planted next to the river. He's since pulled it out because it was the wrong grape in the wrong soil. Right. There was no one who had ever grown vineyards commercially. So we did do, as a term of the offer, a very detailed terroir study, but it was still educated guessing. It was 2003.
Absolutely.
People out here, they were planting in Elgin and Elam, you know, more and more further up in the Himalayan Otter Valley, but it was an educated guess, and it was a risk. And the greatest risk, I often say to people, is that we could have grown bad wine. And I think when these vineyards came online in 2005, 2006, started to come online slowly. 2007, 2008 is actually when the vine started producing. South Africa was ready to understand terroir-driven wines. And I think before that, it wasn't necessarily the case. And so the fruit that I grew tasted like nothing that I knew from California or from South Africa. And I had to quickly understand what it was that I was growing and how best to express it. And it took me a couple of years really studying the wines of Europe, understanding restraint and elegance, and hoping that the consumer base would understand that. And the early sommeliers who listed Lismore, I think, really went out on a limb and gave me the confidence to keep going.
That's no, because I mean, why when I said brave? Because obviously, first of all, you have no winemaking background, so you decided from scratch to get into winemaking. And secondly, you chose a remote location, which obviously has where no one else did wine before. So obviously, I mean, the odds were not really on your side, but I mean, passion and love for this dream obviously made it. But also, I would assume it would have been an incredible logistical challenge because you're out of any winemaking region. I think since you've created the appellation, Greyton.
Yes, it's now an appellation. Yes, since 2009.
Exactly. And how did you? I mean, you started from books, or how did you even?
From books. I mean, Google didn't exist back then. This is how long ago this was. You know, there was the internet, but it was sketchy. And definitely from books. I mean, you know, the first time I made Viognier, we planted Viognier because we had shale slopes, diurnal temperature shifts, summer rainfall, extreme cool climate. And so we planted Syrah with a tiny bit of Viognier because maybe we could do something like the Northern Rhone.
It's like a little Condrieu here.
Yeah, you know, but when the first Viognier came off, I literally opened Jancis Robinson's like Oxford Dictionary of Wine and read, okay, in Condrieu they barrel fermented, you know, for 18 months. So I just followed what I read, and it created something that was really unique and very special. And obviously the Viognier and the Syrah have both been drivers of the brand, because they were so unique.
That's amazing, and obviously since I mean your brand has skyrocketed, and yourself you are an ambassador for South African wine overseas, and in this, let's say, decade and a half where you have been here, also South African wine in general has, you know, gained headlines and better ratings, etc. And I find it always amusing how there's a lot of foreigners involved. So I mean, yourself, Andrea Molyneux, I mean, in the industry, a lot of foreigners have to come here to give confidence to the industry and what we're able to. So is you obviously, we're drinking, I mean, one of the most sensational Syrahs in this glass right now, and you in your range, I believe you have Syrah, Viognier, Sauvignon, and Chardonnay. Right. Correct. Mm-hmm. And this is all estate grown.
The Estate Reserve range is now still all of my fruit from Greyton, but the regular Lismore range now, for the most part, is Cape South Coast. I am sourcing fruit from the best vineyards that I can find in my neighboring appellations. There aren't any other vineyards here that I can buy fruit from at this time. So for me to grow my production, I needed to look outside the appellation.
Okay. And has anyone followed you in these 16 years in the area since you created appellation and started planting?
There are a couple of small blocks, you know, half a hectare here, 1 hectare there, from people that are doing this as a hobby. No one commercially yet. I have a neighbor that I'm working on who I think at some point will plant a large planting in this mountain alongside me. But until then, the apple price is very strong. That's the reality. And so it makes a lot more sense to farm apples in a valley like this.
Yeah, and this is an issue a bit everywhere. And tell me about your 2 kids. Any of the boys that is into winemaking already?
Yes, my youngest son Quinn has already made his first wine. It's called Flora, and I'm very proud. And my oldest son Keenan arranged all the design and had the label done, and they sat and they put it all together. And he has his own importer into the UK. It's being poured by the glass at the Ledbury.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, it's listed at Roger Jones' restaurant, The Harrow. It's at Spring, which is also one of the top restaurants in London. And so sometimes when I'm in London, I speak more about Flora than I do about Lismore because I'm so proud. But at the New Wave South Africa tasting, the sommelier team was all there from the Ledbury, and they kept coming up to my table and saying, "Are you Quinn's mom?" You know?
Oh my God!
Yeah,
that's
it was
amazing.
So cool, very cool.
But that's probably the biggest achievement.
It is,
of them all.
Yeah.
So wow, okay. So just to recap, I mean, I think we're running out of time already. But I mean, I don't know. I have so much admiration for what you've done. I must say, you've taken your bags from Southern California, came here, you found a vineyard, you established a brand within 16 years of incredible success, and now you've made sure there's a legacy and that this continues with your kids. I mean, I can only cheers you to that, and thank you for providing us with such incredible wines and incredible stories which are an inspiration. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you very much.
Thanks.